Good morning, everyone. Now we will start the 9th International Arctic Shipping Seminar, which is hosted by the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries of the Republic of Korea. Before we have the official opening ceremony, we have a morning session which is dedicated to academic discussions. Well, this academic session, sponsored by the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, will have participants from Korea, China, Norway, and Japan. We have 4 countries and experts from each nation participating in the academic session, discussing and sharing their research activities. And the academic session will be moderated by Dr. Deng Bei-shi from the Polar Research Institute of China. Dr. Bei-shi, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleague, I'm honored to be the moderator. I'd like first to appreciate the great effort of the organizer to make this seminar a reality in such time of difficulties. For Arctic shipping, actually, the year 2020 is filled with both opportunities and uncertainties. On one hand, the range of Arctic sea ice reached the second lowest record in history, and on the other hand, the COVID-19 is jeopardizing world history, oil industry, and maritime trade. The Arctic shipping is suffering collateral damages. So in today's morning sessions, scholars from the International Joint Research Project on Eurasian Arctic Transportation and Logistics will share their perspectives. The international project starts from 2016 and aims to strengthening ties and cooperation between academia, entrepreneurs, and policymakers in Norway, Russia, China, South Korea, and Japan with regard to Arctic shipping and logistics. Well, the first floor will be given to Mr. Sergei Barsomov. He's head of Center for High North Logistic Information Center in Nord University, Norway, and he will analyze the Northern Sea Route transit voyages in 2020. Please take your floor.
Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sergei Balmasov. I'm from the Center for High North Logistics in the northern Norway, and I'm very glad to be here today. Thank you for organizers to inviting me to the 9th Arctic Shipping Seminar. And I will briefly talk today about transit statistics during last 10 years on the Northern Sea Route. So I will make an overview of all 10 years in the first part of my presentation, and I will focus on the last year, on the current year, 2020, with some more details and explanations what is happening in this year. In the very beginning, I would like to say that our center has been monitoring the statistics on the shipping traffic on the Northern Sea Route for the last 5 years, where we collected all the data, not only transit voyages, but we started making an Arctic shipping traffic database since 2016. So we are using the Exact Earth company information that allows us to set up a database with separate voyages with different parameters and information. We are also using the information from the Northern Sea Route administration. So at the moment, we already have collected more than 10,900 separate voyages in our database. So we think it's quite useful to track down the quantitative records about voyages and development of the all Arctic projects. So let us start with the overview of all
네, 전체적으로 저희가 한번 통계를 내보도록 하겠습니다. 지난 10년 동안의 통계를 보시게 되면 총 376개 항해가 북해 북극항로에서 있었습니다. 지금 화면에서 보실 수 있는 것과 마찬가지인데요. 그중에 200건 이상이 동쪽 방향의 항해였습니다. 그리고 164건이 서쪽으로 운항된 구간이었습니다. 선박 수를 보시게 되면요, 총 230척의 선박이 이 운항에 참여했습니다. 다음으로는 이 그래프를 한번 보시게 되는데요, 우측 상단의 그래프가 되겠습니다. 바로 통항 화물의 통계가 되겠습니다. 2013년까지 증가하다가 현격하게 감소하게 되는데요. 이런 요인들에 대해서는 이미 저희가 많이 이야기를 했던 것 같습니다. 5, 6년 전에 제가 상세하게 이야기를 했는데 이렇게 수송량이 계속 줄어들어서 2018년까지는 물동량이 저조하다가 계속해서 증가하는 추이를 보여서 올해는 제가 듣기로는 몇 주 전에 말씀을 드렸는데요. 120만 톤 이상의 물동량을 기록하게 될 것으로 예상이 되고 있습니다. 하지만 아직까지 최종 수치는 아닙니다. 아마도 최종적인 수치는 조만간 러시아 당국으로부터 저희가 전달을 받게 될 것으로 예상이 되고요. 다음으로 하단의 그래프를 보시게 되면 통항 건수가 되겠습니다. 지난 10년 동안의 통항 건수를 보시게 되면 2010년부터 시작을 해서 계속해서 2013년까지 증가하는 추이를 보이다가 다시 한번 감소하는 추이를 보이게 됩니다. 올해는 저희가 62항차의 운항을 보게 됩니다. 2013년에 72항차 통항이 있었습니다. 하지만 그 당시에 항차를 계산했을 때 기준이 지금과는 다릅니다. 31항차는 사실 2013년 기준으로 말씀을 드리고 있는데요. 사실은 북극 항로를 횡단하는 것은 아니었습니다. 그러니까 반통항이라고 할 수 있겠습니다. 무르만스크에서 페벳으로 이동하는 그런 방식이었던 거죠. 그렇기 때문에 62항차의 북극 항로 횡단 운항이 사상 최고 수치가 되지 않을까 저는 그렇게 생각을 하고요. 다음 슬라이드에서는 국제 통항의 통계를 보실 수가 있습니다. 그리고 러시아 연안 무역 항차를 보실 수가 있는데요. 통항의 다양한 목적이 존재를 하겠죠. 그런 것들을 통계로 한번 내봤습니다. 네, 전체 통항의 절반 정도가 러시아 서쪽에서 러시아 동쪽으로 운항을 했던 항차가 되겠습니다. 우측에 보시게 되면 이 두 개의 표를 통해서 출발 국가가 어디인지 그리고 지난 10년 동안에 몇 회의 항차가 발생을 했는지를 보실 수가 있습니다. 각 국가별로 분류를 해놨고요. 뿐만 아니라 선박 유형에 따라서 분류를 해봤습니다. 러시아가 1위를 차지하고 있고요. 유조선이 30건, 6개가 벌크선 등등이 되겠습니다. 그리고 2위는 중국이 되겠습니다. 출발항 보시게 되면 순위로는 노르웨이, 한국, 캐나다 등등이 수위를 차지하고 있습니다. 이 그래프에서 연도별 총 항차별 분포를 보실 수가 있습니다. 파란색은 러시아의 연합무역이 되겠고 주황색이 국제 통항이 되겠습니다. 다음 슬라이드에서는
transit on the Northern Sea route, and I made the distribution by type of vessels that transited Northern Sea route. And here on the left side, we see international voyages, the number of voyages, and the type of vessel. So altogether, we have 202 international voyages, and 112 of them were going to east direction and 90 going west. Then the same figures and the same data for the Russian cabotage vessels, we see that majority of the voyages made by tankers and also general cargo fleet, summing up together to 174 voyages on Russian cabotage, and 100 of them were going to east direction. I put it here, this famous photo, which was made 10 years ago in Norwegian town Kirkenes, not far from Russian border, when we gathered all together in April 2010. We gathered all the interested parties and players around the Northern Sea route at the time when it was not really so so much information about this route. And there was many experts invited to this roundtable, and after this discussions, there was some practical actions, and in a few months, it was made the first time ever bulk carrier transportation, which has a non-Russian flag, which carried non-Russian cargo. So it was like a maybe reopening or opening of the Northern Sea route for the international transit trade. So in September 2010, bulker Nordic Barents was loaded with more than 40,000 tons of iron ore concentrate from mine in Kirkenes, and she transited towards China in September 2012. So it was a very good point of development of the transit navigation on the Northern Sea route, and we are very proud to be a part of it, of this start. It was going up and down, and I think after we discuss this year navigation, we will see some further perspectives for the transit navigation on the Northern Sea route. So now I will switch to transit navigation for year 2020, and before I will do this, just to one slide to show the total number of traffic for this year. So by the 27th of November, we counted 2,574 voyages, 331 vessels that participated in this navigation, 331, and 62 transits in the year 2020. One more slide about overall statistics on voyages on the Northern Sea route. So here we have a slide with a distribution of number of.
네, 월별로.
So it basically shows us that every year we have a little increase in the winter time during January up to June, and then it goes up in the summer period and autumn. And this year we probably will have a new record of total number of vessels. Even if the expectations about cargo, I think it will stay more or less the same as the previous year. So now we'll talk about transit navigation in the year 2020. So on the left upper side of this graph, we can see a distribution of number of vessels that participated transit navigation, number of voyages, and also we put here a summary of deadweight that these ships bring to the Northern Sea route. And in this table, we have distributed the biggest number of summary deadweight here, and it belongs to the Marshall Island 2 vessels that made 6 voyages. Then we also have some other vessels and with a less deadweight summary. But what I want to put your attention to in this table that this year we still have the biggest number of vessels belongs to a Russian flag and also biggest number of voyages, but the total summary deadweight is not on the first place, and we think that the role of the international transit voyages it's increasing now. So altogether we counted more than 2 million thousand of summary deadweight for these 62 voyages. Then table here shows us the direction of transit. So it was altogether 24 voyages going to west and 38 voyages going to east direction. Let us have a look to the next slide. And on the left side, we have a table with the so-called Russian big cabotage or Russian transits in the year 2020. And altogether, it was 23 transportation from one Russian port to another Russian port. This next table, it's international transits. And it was 25 international transit voyages where the non-departure and non-destination country belongs to Russia. And we also have 7 voyages from Russia to foreign ports using the NSR as a transit route, and also 7 voyages from foreign port to Russian port. So we continue now with the distribution of the transit voyages by ice class of a vessel. On the graph here, you can see a distribution of the number of voyages by the vessel's ice class. So the biggest number was made by the vessels having Arc 4 ice class. So here we see the input to the overall summary deadweight, number of voyages with the Arc 4 ice class, and number of vessels. So also we can check for each type of the vessels. So let's say here we have a tankers. So it was 5 tankers made 5 voyages. Then the biggest number in this sector, Arc 4, was general cargo vessels with 19 voyages made by 12 vessels. So I will not stop too much on these details because we plan to publish a full report on the year 2020 navigation by the 1st of February next year, and this will be available online. So, and we will move forward. Next, I would like to mention for this season, it's a loading port or departure port for the transit voyages. So we see that the port of Murmansk made 9 voyages, and here we have a vessel's name and the deadweight input, how much they have carried from this port. Then some further information about date of departure and ship owner. Then the next port, it's Nunavut, that had 7 voyages out of it, and here we see the list or name of the vessels. So we can actually check for every type of, let's say, transport type of the vessels, and to see that majority of the bulk cargo vessels, they were departing from port of Nunavut, from port of Murmansk. I believe this was a port of loading, and then they were, I think, coming back from Dalian, Nakhotka, Tydrin, and other vessels. So let us move further. So on the next slide, we see a distribution of a summary of deadweight by months and by type of vessels. So on this right slide, on the right slide here, we see that we see a part of a bulk cargo vessel was 58%. So total summary deadweight of the bulk vessels transited the Northern Sea route is 58%, which is majority of let's say transportation on the transit route. Then we have 24% belongs to the general cargo and 7% to the tankers. Other type of vessels, they were less than 5%. And here on this slide, we can see a distribution of these volumes by every month. So we see a little bit in July, a little bit in November. The biggest parcel will go in the month of October. So if we are particularly interested to look through some specific type of cargo, let's say a general cargo, we can click here, and then we will get a specific number of summary deadweight that occurred during 1 month or another. And here we get number of voyages with the general cargo and 17 vessels and the total input for summary deadweight. Now I would like to look at the information about ship owners and who are working on the Northern Sea route. So here on the left side, we see a graph showing companies who participated in the navigation. So the Suec AG company, they made 8 voyages on the Northern Sea route, and they bring mostly 600 summary deadweight. Then the next one is COSCO, having 11 voyages with 387 deadweight, and then so on and so on. So if we just if we choose one company, then we can get a full list of their voyages, so vessel name, voyage direction, and the time of entry to the Northern Sea route. And here below I put information about the average vessel in this particular case, not a vessel, but average company speed, average speed on the Northern Sea route, which is 12.4 knots. It's the average speed on the whole voyage. Oh, sorry, it's average speed on the Northern Sea route. Then we have here average speed on the whole voyage. Then summary of deadweight. So 3 vessels. They made 8 voyages. So they altogether they spent 1,400 hours on the Northern Sea route, and 3 voyages was going west and 5 voyages were going east direction. So this was about the Suez AG company. Then we also have quite a big input from a COSCO company. 11 vessels, as we see here, made 5 voyages to west, 6 voyages to east direction, having 8 vessels and spending more than 2,000 hours on the Northern Sea route. And now I would like to show you a map that we produced for the transit traffic on the Northern Sea route. So you can see here that some of the voyages was departed from this place, Nunavut, going to east direction towards Asian markets. Then ports of Murmansk, Kirkenes, Arkhangelsk, St. Petersburg, Rotterdam. On the European side, they were using both Karagate and Cape Jelania to proceed to the Northern Sea route. And yeah, here we see on the right side the Russian ports participated in this navigation, and also Chinese and other ports as well. So we will publish more maps on our webpage with a high definition after the season is over. And the last slide I wanted to show you today, it's about a speed of the vessels during the voyage on the Northern Sea route. So this year we measured every vessels, not only transit, but all the vessels. We have an average speed. We started doing it, and we are still like in the process of adjusting this calculation technology. But what we've got so far, you can see here on these 2 tables. On the left side, we have an average voyage speed. That means from it's a vessel. It's an average vessel's speed from loading port towards a destination port. So the full voyage. And here on the right, we have a only speed within the Northern Sea route. So this is a different speed. Of course, every vessel has its own speed, and it can be a different month of navigation, having better or worse ice conditions. But what we see this season, when we compare these parameters like average speed during the whole voyage and the Northern Sea route speed, we see that in many cases the Northern Sea route speed even higher than the average speed of the vessel. And of course, in some cases it's a little bit less, but in general we can say that the speed of the vessel at the Northern Sea route is not less than a usual speed of the vessel within her entire route between ports. So our conclusion could be that with a proper planning, within a good season, with a good assistance if needed from a company providing services of the Northern Sea route, like a Rosatom float, so it's quite possible to have a good commercial speed within these 4, maybe 5 months for the summer navigation. And we also see that for the vessels with a higher ice class, like Arc 7, with a good icebreaker support, we see that this window of navigation to the eastern side of the Northern Sea route is increasing today. And now I would like to thank you for everybody who was listening, and I would like to thanks again to organizers for inviting me for event. And I'm ready to discuss and answer questions afterwards. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Barmosa, for the very informative illustration on Arctic transit shipping in 2020. Next, I'd like to call upon Dr. Gao Tianming and Mr. Vasily Irokin, both from Arctic Blue Economic Research Center in Harbin Engineering University of China. The floor is yours, please.
Good day, dear colleagues. Greetings from Harbin, China. We represent Arctic Blue Economy Research Center of Harbin Engineering University. Professor Gao Tianmin is the director and chief expert of the center. My name is Vasily Rokhin. I'm an associate professor and research fellow. We appreciate the opportunity to take part in the 9th International Arctic Shipping Seminar, and we would like to thank the respected organizers for inviting us. We are happy to greet the hosts and all the participants of the seminar today. In our presentation, we will briefly overview the recent and current cargo transportation activities of China in the Northern Sea route, and we will discuss how China may collaborate with Russia and other countries to ensure the development of secure, navigable routes in the Arctic, and to partner in the engineering and construction of various kinds of vessels and maritime equipment. China's vision of its role in the Arctic is not only about opening and securing new trade routes, but also about facilitating Asia-Europe connectivity and bridging the existing gap between traditional industries in the Arctic and China's market. Since the release of the vision for maritime cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative in 2017, northern maritime routes have been incorporated into the Belt and Road network as a polar or ice Silk Road in various interpretations. And such a move demonstrates China's intention to collaborate with all concerned countries to establish a workable economic and transport corridor in the high north. Particularly, China expects its involvement in cargo transportation in polar waters, like import of Russian minerals and other resources, Asia-Europe and Asia-America transit shipping and cabotage. It also expects an involvement in maritime and ice engineering and navigation security to pave the way for Chinese commercial exploration, transport, and logistics operations in the Arctic Ocean. China declares that it intends to build the Polar Silk Road based on the respect of the sovereign rights of the Arctic states over shipping routes and resources, but in accordance with international law, particularly with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Founding its position on this convention, China proceeds from the vision of the Arctic as a mankind's common heritage, but such an approach is not shared by Russia, who actually operates the Northern Sea route. For Russia, the Northern Sea route is a historically established national transport route in the Arctic. Although Russia's regulations of shipping in the route are carried out according to general recognized principles and norms of international law and international treaties of Russia, there is an authorized secondary national legislation, among others, to regulate shipping, icebreakers support, and ice pilotage along the route. While China demonstrates broad inclusiveness and calls for a liberal multilateral approach to the use of shipping routes in the Arctic, Russia advocates the exclusive rights in the Northern Sea route based on historical, geographical, climatic, and security conditions. Freedom of navigation is just an example of how some of the most important provisions of China's and Russia's policies in the Arctic contradict each other. Nevertheless, the two countries have not stressed these contradictions, and so far they have succeeded to avoid collisions in practical politics. Even though Russia-US and China-US relations in the Arctic are characterized by increasing hostility, those between Russia and China, on the contrary, demonstrate increasing convergence. foreign shipping companies, including Chinese ones, started using the Northern Sea route for transit in the early 2010s, and the number of vessels on the route has been increasing, but mainly due to domestic transportations made by Russian flag vessels. The number of Chinese vessels transiting through the Northern Sea route has been growing from 0 in 2014 to 22 this year, as of the middle of November. By developing international transit in the Northern Sea route, China expects that the use of the route could potentially reshape the geography of global transportation, and thus benefit the diversification of the network of China's maritime trade corridors. Since the early 2010s, when the Northern Sea route was promoted by Russian authorities for international transit sailings, the Chinese government has increasingly encouraged big companies to participate in the infrastructure construction in the Arctic to pave the way for regular commercial operations in the Arctic Ocean. Chinese enterprises have invested in offshore oil and natural gas fields in Russia, in mines and shipping infrastructure in Greenland, in resource extracting developments in Canada, and in many other projects in the Arctic. COSCO Shipping Group has entered many investment projects in Europe, like port terminals, for instance, and most of Chinese vessels in the Northern Sea route are actually owned by COSCO Shipping Specialized Carriers Company. Although the contribution of Chinese vessels in particular, and international transit in general, to the cargo turnover in the Northern Sea route has so far been extremely small, its increase is required to execute Russia's plan to achieve 80 million tons of cargo in the Northern Sea route by 2024. Achieving this goal requires significant modernization of the entire transport and logistics infrastructure of the Northern Sea route, as well as the improvement of shipping capabilities. According to the Foundations of State Policy in the Arctic until 2035, Russia is aimed at the development of the icebreaker, rescue and auxiliary fleets, improvement of a control system for ensuring the safety of navigation, construction and modernization of seaports along the Northern Sea route, expansion of navigation opportunities on the rivers in Siberia and the Far East, expansion of railway network to facilitate cargo transportation from inland territories to the Northern Sea route ports, and also development of a space monitoring system and information technologies for continuous and integrated support of navigation and other activities in the Arctic. The plan for the development of the Northern Sea route infrastructure until 2035 actualizes the improvement of navigation and hydrographic support for shipping in terms of ICE-3 pilot vessels, ICE-3 and ARC-7 hydrographic vessels, for instance. It also actualizes the insurance of navigation safety in terms of monitoring of ship traffic parameters and meteorological and ice conditions. And it prioritizes the development of transport infrastructure, for instance, Pevek and Sabeta seaports, Amderma and Pevek airports, Northern Latitudinal Railway, and Belcamur railways. In the field of maritime engineering, Russia's priorities include shipbuilding technologies, for instance, welding of nitrogenous and other types of steels and alloys, augmented reality, additive and cryogenic technologies, protection from icing, propulsive systems, and others. So these priorities also include radio and electronic equipment, for instance, geological, geophysical, hydrographic, and cartographic works, ship traffic control systems, navigation safety, and also one of the priorities for Russia in the field of maritime engineering is engineering of icebreakers and ice-class vessels, like nuclear icebreakers, multifunctional marine rescue vessels, and dredging fleet. China could contribute to bridging some of the gaps that Russia experiences today in the Arctic by the inclusion of Chinese companies in joint projects in the spheres of infrastructure and production. In many ways, the priorities declared by China, they actually match Russia's strategic needs in maritime equipment and solutions. There are 6 principal spheres where China's competences might be used. First, Chinese companies and research institutions could contribute to bridging the gaps that Russia is experiencing by upgrading equipment in the fields of deep sea exploration, ice zone prospecting, and atmosphere observation. Besides, China could become a source of technological innovations in the spheres of oil and gas drilling and exploration, in the sphere of renewable energy development, navigation, monitoring in ice zones, and engineering of icebreakers. In the spheres of engineering, prospective areas for collaboration between China and Russia include engineering projects of marine vessels and equipment, like robotic engineering, marine platforms, and subsea units, for example. They also include digital technologies like augmented reality, 3D modeling, robots, swarm intelligence technologies, and many more. The use of unmanned aerial vehicles for ice monitoring, for navigation, for geophysical and meteorological surveys is a developing sector in the Arctic today. China is one of the global leaders in unmanned aerial solutions, and China could contribute with the technologies of engineering and construction of heavy long-range unmanned aerial vehicles required for the monitoring of long-distance, high-latitude routes in the Northern Sea route. Also, there is a demand for mid-range unmanned vehicles with internal combustion engines and short-range onboard robot aircraft for quick operational surveys of the ice situation. Chinese companies may also participate in the development of unmanned navigation technologies, which have started in Russia recently, including computer vision, including automatic navigation, technical verification, data recording. Chinese companies may contribute to the replacement of the US and European radar equipment on the Russian market. For example, meteorological bios and small low altitude spacecrafts for monitoring of climate, for monitoring of ice conditions or navigation. And also Chinese companies may participate in the development and provision of intellectual geographical information services for data analysis and visualization of navigational charts. Notwithstanding the high-level declarations of ever deeper collaboration and the agreements concluded between Russia and China, the two countries are still rather far from launching effective cooperation in the spheres of shipping and engineering in the north. Chinese investment in Yamal LNG and some other projects in the Arctic zone of Russia are just few spots of partnerships. They do little to address major impediments to the vision of the Northern Sea route as a viable network for transportation and trade, such as lack of icebreakers and transport vessels of appropriate deadweight and ice class, scarcity of seaport facilities, scarcity of coastal infrastructure for sustainable all year-round cargo shipping, underdeveloped systems of navigation aids, ice monitoring, and supported navigation, inaccuracy of nautical charts, and many more of those engineering-related obstacles, apart from still heavy climate conditions and fast-changing ice situation. The establishment of economically viable, technologically feasible, and stable cargo shipping in the High North requires extensive investment in the construction and modernization of the infrastructure in the Northern Sea route. There are infrastructure gaps, including the lack of deep water seaports able to receive large capacity vessels, transport hubs with appropriate logistics and capacities for loading and reloading of various types of cargo, support and rescue points for safe and stable navigation, navigation in the severe and fast-changing weather, wave and ice conditions. And there's also lack of refueling points for Chinese transit vessels and for other foreign vessels. Russia's need for financial resources to move forward the modernization of the Northern Sea route infrastructure and modernization of the icebreaker fleet, along with China's capacity to supply these financial resources, establish a good match for the two countries to collaborate in the Arctic. In 2019, President Putin and President Xi signed the joint statement on developing comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction entering a new era. Concerning the Arctic, the document aims to foster China-Russia collaboration in expanding the exploration and use of shipping routes, infrastructure, and resources. Advancement development zones is one of the opportunities for Chinese engineering companies in the Russian Arctic. They may contribute to the development of polar science, engineering, infrastructure, and various services with their investment, technologies, and ever-growing expertise in the Arctic-related issues. The establishment of joint research centers also contributes to the development of polar technologies. Recent examples are the China-Russia Innovation Center for Maritime Engineering between Russia's Association Marinet and Research Institute of Harbin Engineering University in Yantai. There is also the China-Russia Arctic Research Center established between the Pilot National Laboratory for Marine Science and Technology in Tsingtao from Chinese side and the Shershov Institute of Oceanology in Moscow from the Russian side. And also there is the Russia-China Arctic Research Consortium initiated by Harbin Engineering University and Northern Arctic Federal University in Arkhangelsk. Apart from the advancement development zones, cost-sharing mechanisms in shipbuilding, engineering, and navigation safety would appear commercially advantageous for Chinese companies to be increasingly involved in more intense shipping in the north. In addition to these, one of the effective drivers of cooperation is the establishment of joint enterprises. in 2017, Novatek and Sovcom float from Russia's side, and COSCO and the Silk Road Fund from China's side, they signed an agreement on the establishment of Marine Arctic Transport LLC. And this company is expected to render financial support and implement new logistics schemes for year-round transportation of hydrocarbons from Russia's Arctic to the countries of the Asia and Pacific, as well as it will develop cargo transit between Asia and Europe through the Northern Sea route. Future significance of international transit via the opening transport routes in the north depends on a number of prerequisites, including interests from Russia, which is a key actor and actually a holder of the Northern Sea route, including sustainable cargo base, year-round shipping, and needed navigational support and rescue infrastructure. The adoption of Chinese technologies and engineering solutions requires Russia's openness to accept them and thereby tolerate China's rising presence in the Russian sector of the Arctic, as well as substantial changes to the Russian investment, tax, and labor legislation. Joint China-Russia investment projects should be fostered by tax preferences, like, for example, temporary reduction of mineral extraction tax for oil and LNG projects, and suspension of profit, property, and land taxes. There should also be permissions to attract Chinese labor above quotas, conclude concessional agreements without tendering, and receive federal subsidies for the construction of external infrastructure. Ultimately, the intensification of international transit in the Northern Sea route largely depends on Russia's willingness to modernize national legislation and create favorable conditions for collaboration with China and other partners in the spheres of maritime engineering, shipbuilding, ice and weather monitoring, and navigational services. These were the major points of China's involvement in the development of commercial navigation on the Northern Sea route.
Dear His and Her Excellency, Minister, Ambassador, distinguished experts, and ladies and gentlemen, I am Natsuhiko Otsuka from Hokkaido University Arctic Research Center, Japan. This is my great honor to join the 9th International Arctic Shipping Seminar, Korea 2020. And I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to Professor Song-Won Hong and Associate Professor Shim-Dek No for their great effort to this important seminar and gave me this opportunity. Today, I'd like to share my thoughts on the possibility and characteristics of the Northern Sea route, focusing on container shipping and effects of COVID-19 to the Northern Sea route shipping activities. And here are the topics of my talk today. Firstly, I'd like to talk about Japan's actual performance of the Northern Sea route shipping. And following that, I will show you the current status of engagement to the Northern Sea route shipping of Japan. Then I'd like to show you the case example of trial container shipping via the Northern Sea route, which was conducted 2019. Then I will discuss what could be the determinants of trans-Northern Sea route commercial shipping. And finally, I will talk about the effect of COVID-19 to commercial shipping of the Northern Sea route briefly. This slide shows Japan's record of trans-Northern Sea route shipping. So far, 17 shipments activities have been carried out via the Northern Sea route to and from Japan since 2012. And among them, 4 shipments of LNG were conducted. Of these, 2 were from Yamal LNG. And whale meat was shipped 4 times from Iceland, and forage was shipped 4 times from Europe to 3 ports in Hokkaido and in Kyushu. This figure shows the destination ports and origin ports of Northern Sea route shipping in Japan since 2012. These ports are found from the northernmost region as Hokkaido to the southernmost region as Kyushu. Among them, Tomakomai and Kyushu in Hokkaido received 3 times of shipment by COSCO specialized carriers, and Osaka received 4 times of whale meat shipment by refrigerated carrier, and Ogishima in Tokyo Bay received 2 shipments from LNG, 2 shipments of LNG from Yamal LNG so far. And here's a brief overview of the Japan's shipping sector regarding the Northern Sea route. Because of the major shipping companies in Japan have little number of ice-class cargo vessels, all those shipping activities of Northern Sea route in Japan were conducted by foreign ship owners. And the Japanese shipping companies are lacking interest on container shipping of the Northern Sea route at this moment. Meanwhile, their target of business would be destination shipping of bulk cargoes. On the contrary, the port authority locating in Hokkaido region, which has geological advantage of locating northeastern gateway between Asian and Northern Sea route, are showing interest on utilizing the Northern Sea route. In the nation level, government ministries have been holding a periodical session to share information on trend of Northern Sea route and holding a similar session with business enterprises, municipalities, and researchers. Under such circumstances, bulk cargoes are gradually shipped between Europe and Japan as a destination shipping, and awareness of Northern Sea route is gaining among cargo owners in Japan. In the Arctic study field of Japan, a new 5-year national project of Arctic research, namely Arctic Challenge for Sustainability 2, ARCS-2, has just been launched in June 2020. And this ARCS-2 will not only promote advanced academic Arctic research, but also intends to assess the impact of Arctic environmental change on society, implement research achievement in the society, including policymakers. In its strategic goals, the project strengthens the study field of developing safety and sustainability of ice navigation, analyzing interrelation between international maritime transport network and the Northern Sea route, and economic and social impact of the Northern Sea route. But I'd like to show you a positive example of Japan's shipping sector in Arctic shipping. So far, Russia conducted a few times of trans-Northern Sea route container shipping by nuclear cargo ship and started a new project which aims at trans-Northern Sea route container liner shipping in the future. Marx conducted one-time trans-container shipping by the maiden voyage of ice-class container carrier from Chinese shipyard to Europe via Korea. But these attempts were not commercial-based activity. In 2019, Tomakomai Futo Corporation Limited, Tomakomai Port Authority, and COSCO Shipping Specialized Carriers has conducted trial trans-Northern Sea route container shipment from Helsinki to Tomakomai. This attempt is aiming at examining commercial possibility of trans-container shipping between Hokkaido and European ports. For this trial, 20 of 40-feet containers which were imported from Finland to Hokkaido had been chosen. The cargo was lumbers for house building in Hokkaido. In order to ship these containers, shipping schedule was adjusted with ice-class general cargo vessel of COSCO Shipping Specialized Carriers, which was originally planned to transport wood chip from Finland to China. By good fortune, both schedule of cargo owner and shipping company were adjusted, and the first trial of Trans-Northern Sea Route container shipping to Japan became a reality. From this trial, we recognized the importance and potential of quick delivery which could be achieved by the Northern Sea Route against the conventional Suez Canal route. Then, what could be the determinants of Trans-Northern Sea Route container shipping at this moment? Basically, container carrier is mostly occupied for liner service network, even in the case of ice-class vessel, so we can hardly find ice-class container carrier for temporary Northern Sea Route shipping. As a result, Trump liner shipping of container must find multi-purpose bulk carrier which has similar schedule and destination for her original cargo at this moment. Here, availability of ice-class cargo ship and long enough navigational period might be desired from cargo owners. On the other hand, fairly number of cargo volume and stable periodical demand might be desired from shippers. And in the case of container shipping by the Northern Sea Route by Trump liner shipping cost is not competitive against the regular service via the Suez Canal. So in order to get profit from the Northern Sea Route container shipping at this moment, sufficient volume of cargo which enables to cover additional cost for calling at the port for containers is indispensable. And what could be the determinants of Trans-Northern Sea Route commercial shipping? As of the end of 2019, more than 300 Trans-Northern Sea Route voyages were carried out between Atlantic and Pacific Ocean ports. All these attempts were temporary destination shipping, and mainly bulk cargo was transported. Basically, most of voyages were successfully completed without notable delay or problem. And through these accumulated experiences, shipping market might gradually gain practical knowledge of the Northern Sea Route for their businesses. And based on these experiences, the determinants of Trans-Northern Sea Route shipping could be considered as can be seen in this slide. Firstly, sea ice retreat enables to expand summer navigable period and chance to match time-dependent cargo demand and ice-class ship schedule. But it would be hard to find high ice-class cargo vessel that can sail the Northern Sea Route in winter, and it is not easy to achieve competitive shipping cost in near future. So the discussion of year-round shipping of general cargo would be a matter of long-term view. And fuel price is one of the key elements of the Northern Sea Route shipping cost. Higher the fuel price becomes, the Northern Sea Route shipping cost feasibility against the Suez Canal route becomes more competitive. And currency of Russian ruble is also an important element for icebreaker assistance fee because it is prescribed in Russian ruble. And availability of Russian nuclear icebreaker is often questioned, but it is not serious issues under recent sea ice retreat in midsummer to fall. However, if shipping activity expands to ice existing season and number of ships start to enter the Northern Sea Route, this would be a serious issue and uncertainty of navigation would increase. And ice and weather forecasts are achieving both Russian information service and non-Russian commercial service as well. And satellite monitoring of sea ice is also achieving, but still there remain many issues to be developed. And so far from Japan's actual achievement on Trans-Northern Sea Route shipping, quick delivery and free from piracy was highlighted rather than cost effectiveness after downslide of freight market since 2014. And among the above issues, ambitious motivation of shipping sector can be a driver to develop further utilization of the Northern Sea route. For example, Russia is planning to develop Trans-Northern Sea route container shipping business between Murmansk and the Far Eastern port. And the port of Tomakomai in Hokkaido region in Japan has been achieving its activity to utilize the Northern Sea route for both bulk and container transport between Europe. And from here, I'd like to touch upon the effect of COVID-19 to the Northern Sea route shipping in brief. According to the projection of Transport Intelligence Limited, COVID-19 has amplified pre-existing troubles in global container freight forwarding market, such as oversupply of vessels, downturn of freight price, and US-China trade conflict to contract 1.1% in the best case, while 7.3% in severe conditions by market value in 2020. Among them, the North American sea freight market growth is projected to contract 12.1%, while 8.2% in European market and 5.7% in Asia Pacific market by severe impact case, which can be seen by red bar in the graph on your right. And by monitoring the ship traffic of each arrivals and departures in Japan, China, North America, and Europe, number of ships arrived at Japan decreased from the end of January until March 2020, then recovered to the same level of previous year. Among them, container carrier and bulk carrier showed the same tendency above, but car carrier has decreased after April. And as of June, impact to Japan's maritime transport seems to be definitive. On the other hand, number of ships from China to Japan, Korea, India, Europe, and the United States mostly decreased, except for bulk carrier to Europe. And at this moment, Northern Sea route is utilized for limited cargoes as a niche shipping market against the current circumstances of dull freight market and inexpensive fuel price. So far, destinational shipping of crude oil and LNG from the Russian Arctic coast does not seem to decrease. And except for LNG, there is no regular cargoes to use the Northern Sea route for east-west cargo transport. So, although this stagnation of maritime transport might cast a shadow to the Northern Sea route commercial shipping, Northern Sea route shipping might experience plateau rather than losing a large amount of cargo demand. However, if structural shift might happen in the international specialization of manufacturing and maritime transport triggered by this pandemic, it would be necessary to reconstruct the plan for utilization of the Northern Sea route for those who are aiming at utilizing the Northern Sea route, such as Russia, Hokkaido region, and Tomakomai Port Authority as well. And this is the end of my slide. And thank you very much for your kind attention. And I hope we could overcome this pandemic soon and hope to see you by face to face. Thank you very much.
Well, once again, good morning, everyone. My name is Hong Sang-won. I'm a professor at Yongsan University, also the head of the Yongsan University's Institute of Arctic Logistics. And I'd like to ask for your understanding that my voice may not be that loud enough because I'm wearing a face mask for quarantine measures. So the topic of my presentation today is the assessment of 10 years of navigation on the Arctic shipping routes, mainly focusing on Korean perspectives. Well, we have participants joining the seminar online from the countries abroad. So let me briefly introduce about the Institute of Arctic Logistics. Well, the institute was established back in 2010 under the Yongsan University here on the campus. And what we are doing, our main tasks are from a commercial perspective, meaning from a view of a commercial operation, we look into the shipping and transportation in the Northern Sea route. So in 2010, there was a international seminar hosted by the Ministry of Transport in Russia. So that was the starting point for us to have a really full-fledged research activities. So for about 10 years, we have been organizing together with the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries in the Republic of Korea. We also host annually this seminar, and in 2011, we also, starting from that year, we have a lot of joint research activities. And what I'd like to discuss today is once again the assessment of 10 years navigation on the Arctic shipping route, and followed by Russian policies related to the NSR and potential cargo items in the NSR and other activities in the region. Those are the main contents of my presentation today. And the graph on the slide is often referred to for the discussions. Well, maybe you cannot see this, flashlight clearly because it's green, but here, starting from 2018, cargo traffic dramatically is increasing. That's backed by the completion of a Yamal LNG project. So many products from that project have been transported through the Northern Sea route, and we have our research focused on the transit cargo traffic in particular. So as of October this year, the NSR transit cargo marked 1.28 million tons. So, of course, the peak record was about a year ago. But now we are once again growing to reach that level. We have a lot of information to share, but due to time constraint, I'd like to just highlight a couple of them. First of all, the navigation period on the Northern Sea route. So usually between July and November, roughly 5 months are the regular or general navigation period, but maximum, the optimal period is 3 months from August to October. And in May, there are some ice on the sea, but in May, the Sovcom float successfully transported Yamal LNG to Asia. And obviously, they are trying to expand their transportation as they move forward. And ship types are very, diverse. Some have successfully validated their safety and performance. So we have a very large capacity Aframax class vessels safely navigated on the NSR, and recently the sea ice has melted a lot, so non-ice class, just conventional type vessels several times navigated the NSR without support or assistance of icebreakers. And in Russia, if you look at the top of the slide, Rosatom is the operator of the infrastructure in the region. So by 2035, they plan to have, or they predict to have, international transit cargo 3 million tons. So last year in Vladivostok, I also, asked this question and the Russian government. For them, maybe international transit cargo is not a top priority. It's something secondary. But on the other hand, for foreign shippers, of course, the international transit is one of the main factors. And then to secure long-term stable cargo, obviously there are some players, the shippers, they are playing key roles, and obviously COSC from China is the leader, and this company has already launched regular operation service. For example, they are transporting wind power equipment and perp and others. And next, just for your reference, I have more detailed information. Our evaluation or assessment for the last decade operation on the NSR. This is just a brief summary of our research result. Just to highlight a couple of them, back in 2010 and 2011, back then, Novatek, Russia shipper, their oil products several times transported to the Republic of Korea. And back then, it was roughly 2011 and 12 in Busan and Yeosu in Korea. Our petrochemical products, for example, jet fuel as backer cargo was transported. And back then, we thought Korea has a good marketability. That was our assessment back then. And in 2014, due to the U.S. sanctions against Russia and oil price decrease and many other factors, the transportation did not grow very much. But in 2016, our Korean shipping companies also operated on the NSR. Of course, there are not many. So back then, Pan Ocean, two vessels of Pan Ocean carried heavy cargo. And heavy cargo or comprehensive cargo transportation was successfully made a couple of times. And I'd like to highlight what happened back in 2018. Back then in Denmark, there is a global shipping company, Maersk. Their ice-class vessel, Maersk, they transported containers and successfully navigated through the NSR. So back then, in the port of Busan, that they called in here, I think it was about higher than 1,500 TEU. So they had a transshipment volume. They had electric vehicle batteries made in Korea. And in 2020, because we have sea ice melted a lot, obviously it helped have more favorable navigation conditions. So we have year by year growing number of international transits on the NSR. And as I mentioned before, I will just skip what I've already mentioned in the earlier part of my presentation. So let me briefly touch upon the characterizations of foreign carriers. So there are many foreign carriers with over 10 years of experience in Nordic, from China and Germany and Netherlands. As I mentioned before, back in 2018, Maersk from Denmark, they successfully operated their ice-class container vessel. Maersk has 7 feeders. So their capacity is 3,600 TEU. And in the future, I believe if the NSR provides better navigational conditions, I think there will be more activities on that. But recently, large cargo shippers, they posed quite serious environmental questions. So obviously this is a kind of a burden in terms of developing more transportation on the NSR. And regarding Russian policies, of course, in the afternoon session, we have Mikhail Balkin, who will present more in detail about the Russian regulations and their activities. But it was quite, symbolic that during the last 10 years, Russia has come up with a kind of a rough or a big picture how to develop on the NSR. They have 11 main tasks. So if you look at the number 5, a policy to increase cargo volume and international transit on the NSR, that includes the construction of a maritime logistics center. So obviously this is part of their policy strategies currently under development. And regarding infrastructure on the NSR, once again, in the afternoon session, we will have more information. Maybe you cannot see clearly because the map is not too big. So NTC Northern Transit Corridor, if you look at here, it's a kind of expansion up to Murmansk. So Russian federal government plans to provide extended logistics transportation service connecting Asia and Europe. Once again, the detailed descriptions are provided on the slide. It's the infrastructure development of NSR logistics service. This will be implemented between 2020 and 2024. Kamsak is on the east and Murmansk is on the west. So these two ports at both ends will have transshipment ports to facilitate better logistics services. So Rosatom is the company in charge. So I believe they are currently conducting economic feasibility study. So once it's done, we will have further information on that. So on the route, Arctic shuttle containers are planned to be deployed. And on top of that, better digital services will be provided for better navigations of the vessels on the NSR. And by 2035, there are plans to provide more icebreaker services. So on the map, there are highlighted areas with light red. So Russia obviously plans to build more powerful icebreakers to better cater transit on the NSR. So this is an Arctic shipping information system that's sponsored by the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. So this system is well established now, and constantly we are providing valuable data. The purpose of this system is, at the moment, yes, we have a lot of Korean shipping companies and freight owners. They are not yet fully, involved in utilizing the NSR, so providing more information for them, but we are going to encourage greater participation of Korean players on the transportation of cargoes on the NSR. We have these kind of sources for our data on the system. And fifth is on the analysis of a promising cargo transportation on the Arctic route. So every year we touched upon this topic. So of course, depending on the situation, we have a different prospects. So for example, the exports from Korea to Europe, the promising cargo export items are on the table. For example, motor vehicle related items, electric equipment, and machinery. These three items, as of 2019, they account for 56%. If you look at the table, once again, the flashlight is not maybe bright enough for you to see, but these three items are the main contributors of our cargo exported to Europe. And from Europe, what we have imported in 2019, there are top three items: mineral, machinery, and motor vehicles. We have a lot of European cars in Korea, so they accounted together for 45% of total imports in 2019. So if we look at motor vehicles only, so we have a passenger vehicles. That is the number one export item between Korea and Europe. So from the Northeast Asia and Europe, for car trade, of course, many Korean-made vehicles are exported and vice versa. So many European-made vehicles are imported. So I think it's quite balanced from a trade perspective. And I have a couple of more examples. This is about electric vehicles. Well, there are increasing demand for electric vehicles in Europe. We are exporting a lot of electric vehicles to that continent. It's increasing. So, for example, obviously, Europe is a big import market. Export market for Korea is, electric vehicles. So they account for 70.9% of Korean-made EV exports. So this is a really important market for us. So it's rapidly increasing. And next one is electric accumulators. As I mentioned last year, if you remember, for electric accumulators, they are well exported to Europe, as mentioned before, back in 2018. Betamask from Denmark, they transported, I think it was about 88 TEU. 88 TEU of electric accumulators were loaded together with other Korean-made electric products. Let me move on to Korea's activities related to Arctic shipping routes. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you that it's very active. In the beginning, which was 2011 and 2012, it was more related to Korea. So those resources extracted and developed in Russia, many were transported to Korea, and many petrochemical products were transported to Russia. And 2014, 16, 15, there were successful commercial operations from Hyundai Commercial Shipping and others. We have transported heavy cargoes as well. Let me also briefly mention about the Port of Busan. Well, our institute also constantly monitor the activities by the Busan port, so ship supplies and bunkering activities at the Port of Busan, provision of ship supplies, and then for ship crews, many were actually boarded at the Port of Busan. Unfortunately, these days the number is not that big. Well, this slide shows the NTC, Northern Transit Corridor project, is related to this one. Again, I'd like to ask for your understanding that the map is maybe not that big and clear enough for you to see. In Russia, the government plans to construct transshipment ports at two ends of the NR Northern Sea route at Kamchatka and Murmansk. But what we see is that not these 2 points. Why don't we just utilize already well-functioning existing ports in the region? For example, for Northeast Asia, we have Busan port, but we also have a Shanghai port, and in Europe, Hamburg and Bremerhaven. So between these ports, maybe there's a possibility to have a direct transportation service. Of course, in Russia, they plan to have, ice-class container vessels. So utilizing these vessels, maybe, I believe that there's a possibility to launch direct transportation service. So the Russian federal government, as I mentioned before, have a strategy established to have a shuttle service between these two transshipment ports to be built at two ends in Kamchatka and Murmansk. But once again, on top of that, I'd like to just suggest as an alternative direct transportation services between existing ports. So I think I'm almost used my time for my presentation. So Of course, in Norway, CHNL, they are very active to provide a lot of good suggestions and proposals. So we are here in Korea, we are the ones interacting with them. In China, we have a PRIC. And in addition to that, last year, Harbin, Engineering University also joined as well. And also we have a partner in Japan. So last year in Shanghai, there was a special session and we also presented our research activities. I mentioned a lot of, issues today. And of course, this kind of information are on a regular basis shared with a newsletter published on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. Of course, it is unfortunate that they are only, published in Korean, but we try to share this key information with the necessary key stakeholders. So in closing, so to secure long-term stable cargo volume on the NSR, obviously we need to secure enough and appropriate cargo types. So far, we have focused on the natural resources developed from Russia, LNG, and oil and gas. So we have transit cargoes in operation from Nordic countries with ice-class vessels, but I do not think it will grow dramatically. So from a long-term perspective to secure, sustainable transportation, I think we should also foster growing number of general cargo. So to provide a long-term container transportation service, it should be, both ways and not just a one-way transportation. It should be a round trip. And of course, NSR, in terms of a transit time, clearly has an advantage and competitive edge, but there's a question mark in terms of cost efficiency. So in comparison to TSR and Suez Canal routes, if the NSR cannot secure enough economic feasibility, especially in coast, I think it will be limited only to national project-related cargo. So obviously we need to further develop general cargo, including containers and others. That is a way to enhance more cargo traffic on the NSR. So for Korean shipping companies, again, we do not have a lot of transportation experiences because we are focusing on economic viability. So we are not planning to have just an independent operation. We are focusing on joint operation. And at the port of Busan, so the Northern Transit Corridor project, if it is well implemented, I believe the port of Busan may have a really interesting role to play as a transshipment port. So all the related information is constantly monitored and should be monitored continuously. So if all the plans and strategies laid out by the Russian government, they are well implemented, again, we should also think deeply about the role to be played by Busan port as a transshipment port, and also using the LNG fuel and super low sulfur fuel, how to utilize them for vessels should be taken into consideration, and fueling, ship supply, provision, and other market development should be also discovered by the Port of Busan. I think I've used more than the time given to my presentation. Thank you for listening.
네, 그러면 오전 세션은 이렇게 마무리를 해야 될 것 같습니다. 네, 참석해주신 모든 분들께 진심으로 감사드리고, 네, 탁월한 발표에도 다시 한번 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 네, 향후 이 의제에 대해서 더 많은 아이디어가 있으시면 그런 부분에 대해서 또 이야기를 할 수 있을 것 같고요. Thank you very much. With this, I'd like to know whether there is any kind of question. And if there is no question, I think that we can conclude this morning session, this academic session for this program. I'd like to ask for your understanding and for all the technical issues we had this morning. So let us conclude this academic session. And after lunch, we will continue at 1:30 with the opening ceremony. Thank you very much for your avid participation. Thank you very much.